Okay. Oh, you want the light on?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Take yourself off mute, please. Jan, do the introduction, please.
Oh, hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. And it's really nice to have another episode of Night with the Experts with our expert tonight, who is Roger Johnson, Dr. Roger Johnson. He is really a citizen of the world. He he was raised in the Midwest, but he's lived in New England, Japan, Egypt, the UK, and in Finland. So his university background includes graduation from Swarthmore and a PhD from the University of Connecticut. He's been on the faculties of a university in Finland, whose name I will not attempt even to pronounce, and Amherst, Tufts, and he was a founder of the Ramapo College in New Jersey. His big thing has been research on aggression, both in animals and human beings, which are also animals, and the editor of the ISRA, which I assumed, since I didn't really know, was the International Society for Research on Aggression. And so Dr. Johnson got really interested in how the government handles information about the atomic bomb and nuclear radiation in general. And I think this is what he's going to be talking about tonight, because he found that the nuclear industry has been subject to government secrecy, spin, and public misinformation. Especially today, we see indifference to the downside of nuclear power. So with that, the only other thing I'm interested in is how many languages Dr. Johnson speaks. I didn't ask him until now, but I want to introduce you to Roger Johnson.
Thank you very much. Well, the answer is about 5, but I don't speak them fluently. I speak some Finnish, and I speak some Arabic. I speak some Japanese and French, and I can even do English in a pinch.
Right, good.
So I'm going to talk today about the issue of radiation and public health. It's a complex issue, has a long history that combines science, politics, and history. One thing I want to talk about is look at this report. I don't know if you can see this. Is this showing up? Yes. Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiment. Look at this. It's 1,000 pages long. There's 4,000 experiments where the U.S. government did in secret, without people's knowledge or consent, radiation experiments, and really hideous ones. Another thing I'm going to talk about is the report of the National Academy of Sciences, analysis of cancer risks in populations near nuclear facilities. And one of the issues that I want to end with is that in spite of the Biden war on cancer, the government is blocking cancer research. That's just amazing. They won't let the National Academy of Sciences conduct this research. Another thing I can show you on the screen here is this little rock. And when I was a kid, I lived in Japan, and I picked this up from Ground Zero in Hiroshima in 1948. It's a piece of granite with a snail molded into it. So the melting point of granite is about 1,300 degrees, and the Ground Zero at Hiroshima is about 5,000 degrees. Some say 7,000. Here's a little piece of twisted metal. It's not radioactive, don't worry. So I picked those things up. So I want to talk about the development of the atomic bomb and all these things. I'm going to ramble on and change paths here a little bit. The painting behind me, some people ask about that. It was done by a Norwegian painter, Fridtjof Schroeder, who was in the faculty of the State University of New York in Purchase. And it reminded me of Finland, where I taught that Janice pronounced Jyväskylä, University of Jyväskylä. That's in central Finland. I went there in the wintertime. It snowed every day. It was minus 20 degrees every day. Our kids skied to school, but it was an amazing experience. But like in the painting, the sun barely skirts the horizon. In the wintertime, in the summer, it's sunny all day. But I mentioned Finland because it's the only country which really has an advanced system for being able to store huge amounts of nuclear waste. And that's a huge problem for the US, and it's a huge problem for everybody else in the world. But now I'm in sunny Southern California, San Clemente, and it's known for three things. First, we have great surfing beaches, but unfortunately, many of those beaches are where our nuclear power plant discharges radioactive waste. A lot of the surfers don't know that. And that brings me to the second notable feature of San Clemente, and that is our very own nuclear power plant. It's actually across the county line in San Diego, but it's a couple of miles away, and the government officially located it here. A lot of the locals of San Clemente don't even know that we are the home of our very own nuclear waste dump. This brings me to the third attraction. Down the street is the Casa Pacifica. That was the Western White House for Richard Nixon. And even Franklin Delano Roosevelt went there a few times. But Nixon was a big supporter of nuclear power, and he proposed building 1,000 nuclear power plants all across the country. He wanted to line the coast of California with power plants. He even wanted to put one in downtown San Francisco. But the locals here knew about the immense dangers of nuclear power. And so when they saw Diablo Canyon up the coast being built and San Onofre being built in the 1960s, people got concerned. So about the time Nixon was getting impeached in Washington, the people in California passed a moratorium on nuclear power. No more nuclear power in California until they figure out a way to safely dispose of the vast amounts of highly lethal radioactive waste. But guess where the country is now? As that was half a century ago. We're still at square one, trying to figure this out. But the good thing is that the result is that California never built another nuclear power plant. Now, another thing that concerned not the public, but it concerned the corporations, the people who wanted to make money off nuclear power plants. They recognized that anything nuclear was extremely dangerous, and there could be huge liabilities if there were accidents. So they persuaded Congress to pass the Price-Anderson Act. That indemnifies the operator of a nuclear power plant in the event of a big accident. Huge financial losses will be passed along to guess who? You, the taxpayer, and the operator of the plant will suffer minimal risks. So that opened the floodgate for the development of nuclear power. And it also led to the long-standing government policy of maintaining that nuclear technology is completely safe. Radiation is nothing to worry about it. So let's switch to some slides here. Okay, is this on?
Yes, we can see them.
Okay. Well, this is our very own San Onofre nuclear power plant. It's called SONGS because they wanted to give it a harmonious perspective, SONG, San Onofre Nuclear Generation Station. So look where it's located, right on the Pacific Ocean on one side, and look on the other side is an interstate highway we call the 5. And that connects Los Angeles with San Diego. And look at the seawall in front of that, a little tiny seawall, and look at the ocean. There used to be 3 of these domes, but one of them lasted about 20 or 25 years, and they had to demolish it. And that's where they now store the nuclear waste. Now, in between the interstate highway is a road. Is a little road that goes right past it, and behind it is Camp Pendleton. This is a large military base, 125,000 acres, and the Defense Department considered one of its most active and important installations. So we can regularly hear artillery fire just a few miles from there. So now there's also a rail line that goes in there. It's the main rail connection, and guess what? In the last couple of years, the rail line began to crumble because sea level rise, and they had to stop the rail line. That was a big problem here. So the rail line is collapsing, and here we have a nuclear power plant that's about in the same location. So let's take a couple. If you drive right past the plant, anybody can do this. You just walk along to the parking lot, and you can see here's the ISFAC, the Independent Spent Fuel Storage Facility. 123 canisters loaded with close to 2,000 tons of nuclear waste. Here's a better view of it. You can see 73 canisters here. There's 43 that are horizontal, and the beach is off to the right. Here's another feature of it. This shows that it's only 108 feet from the beach. And here's another one. It so happens that we are on the Newport Englewood earthquake fault zone. It goes right through here. And so no one knows, when is the next earthquake going to be and how large will it be? The nuclear industry likes to trivialize earthquakes and risks, and they often do what they call probabilistic risk assessments. In 2010, they predicted a large earthquake would hit Virginia once every 1,000 years, and that came in 30 years. They predicted the simultaneous failure of both emergency shutdown systems and a nuclear power plant would happen only once every 17,000 years. And then in 1983, it happened in 4 days at the Salem, New Jersey nuclear power plant. So how many people live around here? Well, look at this. If you take 100 kilometers radius around the plant, you got about 15 million people. How many people live around nuclear power plants in the whole country? Some estimates are that 100 million Americans live near a nuclear power plant. So the beach around the plant is open to the public. And look at this, it's a stone throws away. You just walk along this beach, throw a stone at it if you want. So what does it look like if you do a diagram? This is Holtec's diagram of what it looks like. And see that seawall way up there and everything? Well, this is their diagram. Now look at this. That's what it actually looks like when you get high tide and waves. Does that make any sense? Here's another one. That's what it actually is now. And it's not even sea level rise, it's just starting. So now look at this, go back to the Holtec diagram, and now look at a revised diagram. So that's what you see in the pictures. So the waves are already splashing near the top of it, and the place could be inundated with seawater. And one danger is that the air tubes, that is called for air cooling on the sides of the canisters, could be flooded. It could also wash down from above, and it can flow right into the air cooling temperatures. And so the Edison says, well, no problem, because water's a great cooler. Well, the water will boil away. You have 600-degree canister temperatures against 60-degree ocean water. That could be thermal shock. Who knows about that? But the seawater is going to contain salt and sand and dirt and mud and algae and seaweed, and it's going to dry up and cake, and it's going to clog the bottom of the air vents, and that's the end of air cooling. So what happens to the loss of air cooling? To come in and dig that all out is fairly difficult and close to impossible. So they talk about a 30-foot seawall, and they put that in their documents. Well, they count the beach, and they measure at low tide. But if you walk up there, this is what it looks like. That's Gary Hedrick. He's head of San Clemente Green with a pole there. It's actually 14 feet. Now, what else is underwater there? There's a gigantic system of piping that discharges radioactive waste into the ocean. These are 18-foot pipes 18 feet in diameter. They're huge, and they have 5-foot portholes in them along the way, and that's where they regularly discharge this waste. So what this does is it has a harmful effect on the marine life, and as a result, Edison was forced to build in 2008 a reef, and so they built a reef that was how many acres? 175 acres, and they bragged about how the sea life was going to be restored, but it failed. So 10 years later, they had to build another reef. In the meantime, Edison is known for retaliating against any employees that speak out. Oh, first, let me go back to this important chart here from the NRC. This is 1 decade out of 5 decades about the radioactive releases, the atmospheric releases and the ocean releases. So if you look at the column on the right, that adds up to about 150 billion gallons in that decade, just 1 decade of radioactive seawater that is dumped into the Pacific Ocean. And then you can see the number of gaseous releases, how many hours a year. So they have air ejectors, they pump this into the atmosphere, and the wind blows it into the public. So I think everybody should go look at their own nuclear power plant and get these figures and see how much they discharge into your waterways and into your atmosphere and which way the wind blows. Now I started to say that Edison tends to retaliate against its workers who speak out. And so this is a chart of this. This was done by Donna Gilmore at santanosforsafety.org in the lower right-hand corner. They have the worst complaint record in the nation. And here they're all listed there. So what is a public reaction? Well, there's a lot of anger. A decade ago, there were huge demonstrations. Some demonstration years ago, there were 15,000 protesters. And here are people marching up and down the streets of San Clemente. Chernobyl cans. One of the big debates in the nation is how to store the 100,000 tons of nuclear waste. So the government used to force nuclear waste on people without their consent or even without their knowledge. But now they have a principle called informed consent. No nuclear waste can be forced on people who don't want it, and that's great. But it doesn't apply to people who already have it. So the San Clemente has to live along with other cities with this nuclear waste. So the City Council of San Clemente, thanks to Mayor Duncan, passed this resolution, which says clearly, we do not give consent to store this nuclear waste in our town. So some of this resulted in the Surfrider Foundation, which is a local national organization here for surfers, and they objected to all this nuclear waste. So they sued Edison, and Edison finally gave in, and they said they will start announcing their dumps of radioactive waste 48 hours in advance. Normally what nuclear power plants do is they do it in secret. They don't tell anyone, they don't announce it in advance. Then a year later, they put it up, bury it in the NRC website. So you can go up and look up what yours is doing. So what they did was release these warnings 48 hours advance. They put it on their website. They don't really publicize it very much. I don't know if San Onofre is the only nuclear power plant in the country. Maybe somebody can tell me. But so what happened is people went up and down the town. They put up signs like this: warning, today, surf at your own risk, radioactive discharges. Here's another one: swim and surf at your own risk. Now there's lots of other dangers here, other than the blunders. For example, when they installed a 420-ton reactor 80 degrees off, and then one time they had bird dung clog the gutters, the water leaked into the power plant and they had to close it. What about earthquakes and tsunamis, wildfires, sabotage? There was one incident where someone poured antifreeze into the gas tanks of the emergency generators. Plant had to be shut down. What about 9/11 type airplane crashes? There's 19 airports here. Could there be truck bombs, mortar fire? There's about 19 parking lots in the public state park surrounding the plant. Anybody could shoulder fire armor-piercing weapons into it. Or missiles. I don't know if you've heard of this. This is for sale on International Arms Market. It's a missile. Comes in a pod of 4 missiles inside that. It fits in a regular container for a cargo ship container. Guess how many cargo containers pass by here every year? It's about 20 million. Cargo ships are out there all the time at ports of Los Angeles and ports of Long Beach. So this is the LoRa. It's minutes to target. It has a 1,200 pound warhead, has a range of 200 miles. And just imagine if a few containers out there start firing these missiles and destroying the whole 73 canisters right on the edge of the ocean. So let me shift gears here a little bit and ask what month it is. November, did you know this is the academic writing month? It's the Holy Souls and Purgatory month. It's also the No Nut month, and I'm not going to comment on that. You can guess what it is. But it's also the lung cancer month, the neuroendocrine cancer month, the pancreatic cancer month, and the stomach cancer month. And last month, it was breast cancer and lung cancer. In fact, every month is a cancer month. Here they are. Every part of the year has a cancer month. And guess what? President's wife, Dr. Joe Biden, celebrates this. She had a press conference about the cancer moonshot. And here's the president. He does the same thing. So the war on cancer. So I wrote to Joe Biden and I asked her, well, if you're so concerned about cancer, then why is your government blocking the cancer study from the National Academy of Science? If there's a war on cancer. Well, I got a card back and she said, thank you very much for supporting the Biden administration. So cancer is the #1 killer in the country. And I once addressed a group of about 75 people and I asked them, who has any issues with cancer? Some of their friends or family, every hand shot up. So there's lots of kinds of cancer, lots of causes of cancer, and lots that remains unknown. But we do know that ionizing radiation causes cancer. Some cause from background radiation which survives it, some is man-made. So let's take a look at the electromagnetic spectrum. NEIS has a nice website reference to this, but it's measured in wavelength and frequency. And if you look off on the left and see an ELF, that's extremely low frequency. In northern Wisconsin, there is an antenna 28 miles long. Also, northern Michigan has one, and they use it to communicate with nuclear subs under the polar ice cap. They linger there for months, and they can't communicate to reveal their location, so they use ELF. I don't think the government uses these anymore. But then you start looking at the very low frequencies, and you come up to monitors like this one, AM/FM tuners. Anybody have an old TV set with rabbit ears? You want to watch channel 2, you pull them all the way out. And you want to watch channel 13, you push them in. Then there was UHF channels 14 to 83, and they had even smaller antenna. Then you got cell phones, microwaves, and guess what? The only thing we can detect is visible wavelengths. This is an area of 600 to 400 nanometers. So a nanometer is a billionth of a meter. Meter is 39.37 inches. So if you divide that into billion pieces, that's a nanometer. You got 600 nanometers, we have cones in the eye that can detect it, and we call it red. When it comes to 400 nanometers, we have rods. Most of the cells in the retina are rods, and we detect blue. Most animals don't have color vision, but primates do. But some animals can detect infrared and ultraviolet, and we can't. But now you get an ultraviolet, go sit out in the sun in the summer day, and guess what happens to your skin? You get sunburn. And now you're getting into ionizing radiation. And then here you have X-rays, gamma rays, you have alpha, beta, gamma rays, neutrons, and these are extremely dangerous and extremely damaging. What does ionizing radiation do? It does lots of things. There's all kinds of ionizing radiation comes from the different isotopes, and it causes all kinds of damage all over the body. So this is one example of what we're worried about. So let's go back to the history of X-rays. I'm really advancing a little bit here, but it was in 1895. Actually, the November 8th is the World Radiography Day, the anniversary of Wilhelm Röntgen, who discovered a new kind of visible light. His wife was the first person to be X-rayed, and she looked at her bones and said, "Now I've seen death." And later she died of cancer. A year later, a man named Fritz Getzel established the first dental X-ray, and he provided practitioners of images of the jaw. Well, he died in 1927 of cancer. Then Marie Curie was one of the great pioneers, and she used to carry around tubes of radioactive materials in her lab coat, and guess what? She died of cancer. But one of the things that interested her was radium, glow-in-the-dark radium. So industry quickly took advantage of this, and they decided we could make the watches and dials on watches radio. We could see them in the dark, so they would paint them. So they had radium girls. You probably heard about the radium girls. They were instructed to point the brushes by sticking in their mouth and pursing it. And then guess what? They got cancer. There was a big to-do about it. The industry claimed radiation is harmless, but about 30 died from this. Then there's, I wonder if you remember these things. These are pedoscopes. Did you go stand in them? I did when I was a kid. You go to a shoe store and you stand and put on a shoe and see if it fits. You can see your bones like this. It was great fun, but it was dangerous. And they finally banned them, but they didn't ban them until 1970. Well, in 1938, the German theoretical scientists suggested the possibility that atoms could be split, resulting in enormous bursts of energy. Possibly a bomb could be created. So the Hungarian physicist Leo Szilard contacted his friend Albert Einstein, and to him wrote a letter to President Roosevelt in 1939 saying you should start a project to develop a bomb. Here's Einstein's letter. And as it became closer to the atomic bombing of Japan, Szilard changed his mind, and he wrote a letter with some other scientists asking Roosevelt not to bomb Japan. They suggested blow up Mount Fuji instead, create a tidal wave in Tokyo Bay. That would create a big impression. They couldn't bomb Tokyo because it was already destroyed, and they couldn't assess the damage if they did that. So I attended, as Jan mentioned, Swarthmore College, which is founded by Quakers. And when I was a junior in college, they brought in Leo Szilard to talk. And guess where he talked? At a friend's meeting house that was packed, half of the campus packed in. And I well remember that. It was very influential. He talked about everything to do with atomic bombs and so on. Anyhow, Roosevelt took the advice of Solar and Einstein, and he authorized the project. It's called the Manhattan Project because it was first office was in Broadway, 270 Broadway. They had a vast array of facilities all over the country, and they wanted to have the main centers on the East Coast because they knew there would be radiation. They wanted to blow over the Atlantic Ocean, not over the country. But the mines were in the Southwest, so they decided to build it in an isolated area, New Mexico, called Los Alamos, north of Santa Fe. You should go there if you haven't been there. It's a great place. They have a wonderful museum. They had they had all kinds of parties, atomic headgear, atomic cakes, everything. But anyhow, when they did their first experimentation, they were working on two designs, one uranium, one plutonium. They never tested uranium side, but they tested the more complex implosion design for their plutonium bomb. And in July of 1945, they blew it off at Alamogordo. Some were afraid that they would blow up the entire world in chain reaction, but Oppenheimer convinced them that that would not happen. By the way, go see the Oppenheimer movie if you haven't seen it. There's some things that are inaccurate in there, but it's pretty well worth seeing. The explosion was larger than they expected. And it was larger than the A-bombs dropped on Japan. And it crossed the country, but they didn't even know it then. So we picked it up, Eastman Kodak in Rochester, New York. They said they're ruining our films, and they complained. And so they threatened to sue them. And so they said, all right, we'll give a special notice to Eastman Kodak every time we're going to blow up one of these things. So the public was not evacuated. They weren't warned. The tremendous fireball was seen all the way around. Now, 3/4 of a century, we're still learning about what happened. So if you read the New York Times a couple months ago, what's finally released, this shows about the radioactivity that spread. That wasn't localized around Alamogordo, like people say. It spread to 48 states, and that's how it got into Kodak in Rochester, New York. Big article about this in July. Here's another slide while we're showing slides of this. This is all the nuclear bomb testing in Nevada, spreading all over the country. So we had 1,037 nuclear explosion, and many of them were not in Nevada. They're all over the Southwest. Colorado had a whole bunch of them. What stopped some of these tests was baby teeth. Joe Mangano and others did some studies on baby teeth and found that the patterns of baby tooth isotopes found in the baby's teeth followed the patterns of when the nuclear bombs were tested. A lot of people oppose this. So first we have this is the little boy atomic bomb. And there was a lot of opposition to the decision to drop the bomb. And a whole list of characters. Admiral William Laity said the Japanese were already defeated, and they said by dropping it, we adopted a standard common to the barbarians of the Dark Age. I was not taught to make war in that fashion, and wars cannot be won by destroying women and children. Eisenhower opposed it. Admiral Halsey opposed it. Albert Einstein later opposed it. So anyhow, in Japan, there were 5 targets, and they were Hiroshima, Kokura, Niigata, Nagasaki, and Kyoto. Kyoto was actually the first choice, but vetoed by the Secretary of War, Simpson, because he liked the place. He had spent his honeymoon there. So here's the slide of the first bomb. And it's pretty simple. This is what it is. You got 2 balls of uranium and explosive charge behind it, and you blast it in, and we do it. Now, why was Hiroshima chosen? It was relatively flat. It had no mountains to shield the blast. Visual bomb sighting was there. There was a good visual bomb site there because it has a T-bridge. There's only 2 T-bridges in the world. One is in Zanesville, Ohio, near where I was born. And they used to say, I'll go to the middle of the bridge and turn left. So these target cities were saved up in the war so they could be totally destroyed. That's the same thing they did in Germany with the targeting, with the firebombing of Hamburg and Dresden. So in February of 1945, thousands of U.S. bombers and the RAF, they dropped not bombs, they dropped 4-pound fire sticks, thousands of them. And so 30,000 people were killed. It started a firestorm. 20% of those killed were children. So Arthur Harris was later knighted. Now he's Sir Arthur Harris. And what he says, I don't want all this nonsense about bombing civilians. I want all-out bombing. Well, a lot of people changed his name. So he was called Bomber Harris, and then he was called Butcher Harris. Now, what do we see? We see pretty mushroom clouds. Here's the Key Bridge in Hiroshima. And look what happened after the war. And here's the pretty mushroom clouds. That's what we see. This is what it really looked like. We don't show stuff on the ground. This is Hiroshima. Now the Nagasaki mission was different. Well, this is a man was sitting on the banks of the steps waiting to throw him, and he got incinerated. His shadow is still there. The Nagasaki bomb was rushed, and it was botched from the beginning. The cruiser Indianapolis that delivered it was sunk right after it left harbor, and it sunk in 12 minutes. They couldn't initiate any distress call, and almost all the 1,000 sailors either died from drowning or starvation, or they were eaten by sharks. So when they took off for Nagasaki, the B-29 reserve gas tanks were leaking. It turns out the bomb was miswired. They had to climb into Bombay and rewired it. And then it was aimed for Kokura, but it was covered in clouds. They circled 3 times, gave up and went to Nagasaki, still in cloud cover. They had a sudden break in the clouds, and so they quickly dropped the bomb, missed the target by 4 miles. Then they ran out of gas and had to go back to Okinawa rather than Tinian. So we moved to Japan around 1948. And here's a picture of Nagasaki, Yurikami Valley, totally wiped out. We lived in a meeting with Emperor Hirohito. MacArthur was a big showman, and sometimes we would go downtown and watch it come out and salute and jump in his limo. And one time, me and my brother went there early, and we went and swiped the license plate cover, the VIP license cover off his thing, and we still have it. Emperor Hirohito was famous for his white stallion. Here it is. I got a chance to ride a white stallion. How many people has ridden the Emperor's white stallion? So here's the ground zero at Hiroshima. We took this picture. It's not there anymore. They replaced it with fancy stuff. Here's a picture of my brother and myself at the ground zero at Nagasaki. 1,000 feet away was the famous Yurikami Cathedral. This is the largest Christian church in Asia. And that's what it's like after the bombing. And that's my mother standing there. I think I took this picture. So after the war, I'm going to have to, I don't know, skip some of this, I'm afraid. Are we, Jan, are we okay for another 5 or 10 minutes?
Yeah, usually we try to have the talk last 40 minutes max, because
Okay.
we want to give the people who come here a chance to
Right.
ask you questions and talk about your presentation.
Okay. So we're already about 30 minutes into this, I guess.
You're about 40 minutes in.
All right, my watch says less. So why did they drop the atomic bomb? Well, I'm going to skip all of this, but I did write the 50th anniversary on the LA Times. Targeting civilians is now the ugly norm. Most wars in history have been armies fighting each other, but starting in the World War II, the targets were civilian. We started to kill more civilians and fewer military people. And so if you want, you can go on the Samuel Lawrence Foundation website and you can read this. So then after the war, we started doing atomic tests in the Marshall Islands. And then we talked Bikini, Rongelap, Kwajalein Islands. They did horrendous experiments here. They would take the families and divide up brothers and sisters, put one on an island 10 miles away, one 20 miles away. And then when they later died, they would dig up their bone. The government had grave robbers, and they would take them back and look to analyze them for cancer. And they did the same thing to the U.S. Army. They would station troops at different distances from them and then keep track of their health records. So after the war, they wanted to know more about this, and so they started finding out that some of the cancers took place within a few years afterward. Other cancers took years to develop. So this is the book I showed to you in the beginning. So there were 4,000 experiments on there, and these went on for 3 decades, and they were just horrendous kinds of experiments that where they deliberately irradiated kids and children, pregnant women. They injected substances into the pregnant women to see if it would pass into the uterus. They would inject it into the testicles of prisoners. They went to retarded schools for children, and they put it in their food. They dumped it in elevator shafts. Just all kinds of horrible experiments. And here's one example. This is a letter from a professor from MIT and Harvard, trying to enlist parents into these experiments, not telling them anything about what they are injecting. Reminds me of Nazi doctors. J. Robert Lifton wrote about that. I'd like to recommend this book by my colleague Ace Hoffman of the Code Killers. He tells all kinds of things. Here's all about the atomic bomb tests. Did you know that no insurance policy covers radiation damage? So if you lose your house or your car, it's not covered. Total loss. Steps in the nuclear process. Another thing we don't emphasize enough is the 3 steps, the front end and the back end of nuclear power. In the Southwest and the corners of Colorado, the uranium miners started dying. And so here's a piece in the New Yorker magazine called The Uranium Widows. Go read it. And I went there, and they bulldozed the entire town. So all these miners died of cancer, and it's still contaminated. They spent $23 million trying to rebuild it. Here's the waste isolation pilot plant, and everybody knows the joke about that when a couple of years ago they had a fire caused by kitty litter. They used kitty litter, cost $2 billion to fix it. So here's 3 Mile Island effects. Now this is the book I wanted to mention quickly. The National Academy of Science published this in 2012. After all the discussion about the dangers of radiation, they have a 500-page document on all of this, and they ended up by concluding we need to do research. And so they were commissioned to do this. They didn't want them doing any actual research. They wanted to talk about research, what research you would do if you were to do research. And they proposed a pilot study. The pilot study concludes these 7 facilities, one of them right here. And they wanted to study everybody within a 50-kilometer radius of these cities to track for cancer. But unfortunately, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which commissioned these studies, when they got to that, they said, well, we already know that the radiation can't do anything. Besides, we can't afford the $7 million. So it's a 20, they have a budget of $2 billion. So the National Academy of Science still wants to do this study. So our own Congressman Mike Levin was able to get legislation passed in Congress to fund it, but they didn't want to go through the NRC, so they went to HHS, and HHS sat on it for a while, and then they had a secret roundtable. You know, if you go to the HHS website, they list about, I think, 16 roundtables. They don't list this one. This was done last February, and they brought in people from the nuclear community, government agencies, a few scientists, but they deliberately refused to invite anybody from National Academy of Sciences, the scientists that were going to do it. And they concluded that there's so little radiation, there's no point in doing the study, and it's premature. And that's where it sits. So we still don't know. And this is hugely embarrassing. You know, here's a book, The Men and Money Behind Nuclear Entry, that was written 50 years ago. Nothing has changed. Here's another one I recommend. John Goffman wrote about comprehensive investigation and low-level radiation, cancer, and other diseases. So these things are kind of depressing, and there's so much we need to know. So radiation has become a protective pollutant, even though the Beer 7 report, accepted by scientists, says linear, no threshold hypothesis, says there's a linear relation between cancer, between radiation and its effect on human biology, and there's no threshold below which it has no effect. So we're now back to this, and we have made no progress at all. Here's Biden, keeps bragging about moonshot, a war on cancer, blocks cancer research. If any of you have any connections with Mr. President or your congressman or senator, please get in touch and try to get this study redone. So here's I started with a Norwegian painter. I'm going to end with a Norwegian painter. This is Edvard Munch, famous painting called The Scream. And that about sums it up. So I'm sorry if I ran over time. So I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. That was a very comprehensive explanation of government subterfuge and secrecy around radiation health. Oh, and there's Jeff Patterson. Goodness. Yes, Jeff Patterson died and had a funeral in Madison, Wisconsin, which I went to Madison for that. I don't know whose slide this is. Is this yours, Dave, or is it yours, Roger?
No, it's not mine.
Oh, okay.
It was
So
mine.
I'm going to turn this over to Dave, and we should move on to the next part of this while we thank Roger Johnson for his comprehensive talk. And so what's next, Dave?
Well, I want to thank Dr. Johnson as well. And I see we have people ready to ask questions and stuff. I've enabled the chat box. So if folks have questions that they don't want to ask publicly, you can put it in the chat box. But I'm going to turn it over to Jan, who will give you instructions on how we proceed with the next part of the program. Oh, one more time. If you are not asking a question or speaking, please put your computer on mute. Sometimes we get background conversations and noises, and it's very disruptive. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go to questions and answers. I want you to know that if you go to the bottom of your screen where it says reactions and you click there, you'll get a bar that says raise hand. And that's how you can ask a question, or you can put your question in the chat. And I'll try to track them, but David usually helps me make sure that if anybody puts a question in the chat that we do get to it. So our questions and comments are limited to 3 minutes. There might be an exception this evening, but anyway, it looks like Diane is really anxious to ask a question. She got her hand up right away. So Diane, unmute and ask your question.
Hi, thanks. It was a great presentation. I loved your PowerPoint. We've talked a little bit in the past about the National Academy of Sciences, and I guess I caution that we really need to be careful what we ask for, because that first half of the study that was done by the National Academy, which then recommended a further study be done at nuclear reactors, was watchdogged with a lot of attention, a lot of oversight. And so we would need to be able to do that on any study that was done, because the National Academy has routinely been it's not just biased for nuclear, it is pro-nuclear. The panels that are set up are generally all nuclear advocates, industries, and it's not an independent thing. So I think if we really want a good study done on nuclear, we should find a different place to house it. And if we get what you're pushing for with the National Academy, it's going to take a monumental effort to track it, and we need to get people on the panel that would be objective. So I'm just sharing that publicly with what you and I have talked about in the past. We've had a lot of history tracking nuclear, National Academy nuclear studies, and it's always uphill.
Thank you very much, Diane. This really corroborates what Dr. Johnson has been talking about.
I wonder if you would like to react to anything, Diane.
Well,
Yeah,
I
like
see-
to,
can you hear
yeah.
me?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can see.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't quite agree with you. I know people at the Nuclear and Radiation Studies Board. Have talked to them. They're anxious to do the study, and they're good. They're good people. And the people on the panel, I think you're always going to have pro-nuclear people anywhere in the government. But I think you can find scientists who are doing this. The main problem, it's a difficult study to do. Epidemiological research is not easy. But I would like to see them do it. And, you know, there's no reason not to do it, because if they fail to find effect, it doesn't mean it doesn't prove there's no effect. You can't prove the null hypothesis. So if they fail to find effect, that's not devastating. And if they do find effect, the British radiation biology, Fairley has said that has listed 60 studies at cancer near nuclear power plants, and a lot of them do show significant effects. And so that's worrisome. The United States has blocked these studies. There's no study since the 1991 National Cancer Institute study. And that was a terrible study, because it only measured people that died. It didn't measure people who got cancer. It measured where they died. It didn't measure where they lived or work. And it used county political boundaries. It didn't use distance from the power plant. So no wonder they found anything. So a lot of studies are being done, they have been done, but the United States, the nuclear industry won't let anybody do the studies. So I'd say let's do it, and let's talk about it. Let's make people aware.
We have a really beautiful audience tonight, 42 people. Okay, Jim Heddle.
I just can't respond that
Oh, I'm
we've
sorry.
been doing this since 1986 and tracking the National Academy, and as recently as 2 years ago, their study was biased to and we had to work and reveal the bias of the panel members. The goal of the National Academy has been to try to find a hormesis or a safe level or a threshold level, and we have to track that every time they do a study. And so I trust that you have people that you know and like, but I also do a really big caution here that it's a major effort, and it really needs to not be done glibly.
I think this is a really very interesting point of disagreement, and it certainly deserves more discussion than we're going to be able to give it tonight. Oh, sorry, just a minute. Now I'd like to call on Jim Heddle, and I'm going to mute myself because I've got this thing ringing. So Jim, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, thank you. We're seeing a huge push for resuscitating old rickety nukes and pushing small nuclear modular reactors. What do you see as the motivation for this sudden coordinated campaign?
There's a lot of powerful moneyed interest trying to get more money for the nuclear power. Look at MIT and Stanford. They get hundreds of millions of dollars in support from the government. So they're going to be all in favor of this. So I think there's always going to be pressure to it. There's a strong and powerful nuclear industry. The NRC, Look at that. Who pays for the NRC? It's paid for. 92% of its budget comes from the nuclear industry, and then they're supported by the NEI, Nuclear Energy Institute. So there's great big moneyed interest here. It's going to take a lot of effort, and that's why I think we need to have some of these public health discussions, because people are. You just go around and ask anybody. Everybody knows somebody who has had cancer, and there's a lot of it we can't control, but there's some we can control, and we better start doing this. And anyhow, I guess it's a big uphill battle, and there's always going to be people that want to spend more money on nuclear power.
Do you see any connection with the nuclear weapons industry? Is there any codependence going on between the two industries?
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. It's all along. I think the whole civilian nuclear industry was started with and was dependent upon the nuclear industry, the DoD, and that's always been that way, and it will continue. So that's a big problem. And look at the Defense Department, all the money they spend on nuclear weapons. My God, it's just astronomical what we spend for it. And so they're big supporters of anything nuclear, and it's not just the DoD and the NRC. Now look at the Department of Energy. The Jennifer Granholm and her assistants go around the country saying nuclear power is clean, and it's not clean at all. It's one of the most environmentally unfriendly form of energy that we can have. You got to count the front end and the back end. They ignore the front end and the back end. Nuclear waste is a huge problem, and it's going to cost billions and hundreds of billions of dollars. An accident is going to cost hundreds of billions. At San Onofre, one estimate is an accident here could run up to $3 trillion. And who pays for it? The taxpayer. Nuclear industry aren't going to pay for it. Sorry, go on.
Right. So, Jim, we allow one follow-up question, and you already had yours. Did you want to say anything more?
No, I'm happy. Thanks for your answer.
Okay. Yes, it was a really good answer. Now, Alice McNally has made a really important comment in the chat, as well as Tom Corbett and Michelle Lee. But the person that we wanted to hear from tonight, besides Roger Johnson, has her hand raised. And so I'm going to call on Cindy first, and then we'll get back to Alice, Tom, and Michelle. But let's hear what Cindy wants to say. Go ahead, Cindy.
So I have to say first that I do agree with Diane DeRigo that dealing with the National Academy of Sciences is fraught. It's always fraught. However, I also have to say that some things that come out of their studies are important conclusions. So for instance, the phase 1 and phase 2 reports for assessment of cancer risks around NRC licensed facilities that Roger pointed to basically said two very important things among some of the other things that they concluded. One of which was that carbon-14, which is routinely released from all nuclear reactors, boiling water reactor and pressurized water reactors alike, comes out in the form of radioactive carbon dioxide, and it comes out in the form of radioactive methane. And it is what the National Academies calls probably the most consequential, or can give the most dose of radioactivity to populations over its lifetime, which is about 5,700, this is carbon-14, about 5,700 years. So they recognized that, and the problem with that is that the NRC didn't even have this stuff measured at all, and only had it be estimated after 2010. So right away we see that any of the doses that are calculated based on what comes out of a nuclear reactor are right away not correct, because they don't measure everything that comes out of a nuclear reactor. Some of the ways that they model the damage from the radioactivity that comes out of a nuclear reactor are wrong. Ian Fairley says that one of the things they have to consider is that the radiation comes out in spikes or batches, both to water and to air, so that the doses that are received by the public around these facilities are not averaged across months or a year or two or however many. It is actually released in a way that can have a lot more exposure in a lot shorter time frame. And so one of the things that we always have to consider when they're doing these health studies is they always like to say, well, the doses were too low to cause whatever endpoint we're researching, even if they find increases in, say, childhood leukemias. But the problem with that is that they don't really know what the doses are. Their models aren't very good, and they don't measure everything anyway, especially for early life stages. So while it is fraught to have the NAS run studies like these, we can be pushing on certain assumptions that are built into the current study models that the officials use. And one of those is that the doses are too low. The doses aren't too low. They don't really know what the doses are doing, and they don't know how much has been put out. And the other thing that was important that these NAS reports said was that if you have childhood leukemias in a community, it is a sentinel indicator that that community had been exposed to radiation. So childhood leukemia is recognized as a sentinel indicator of radiation exposure. And I think that that's what they're afraid of. And when you look at these communities around these reactors, what you need to be looking for, and this is what Steve Wing said also, was childhood leukemias in particular. Childhood cancers more broadly, but childhood leukemias in particular. And I'm pretty sure that Ian Fairley would agree with that. So there are ways to ask what the communities need to look for to be built into the studies. And I think that what we have to do when we go in and ask for these studies to be done is we have to have a set of criteria that they have to abide. And if they don't, then we can call their study no good. But I think that we can start building what it is that the communities need out of a study and demand it from that direction. And that's all I have to say.
I thought that was pretty great. Roger, would you respond to what Cindy said?
No, I think she said very well. You know, you can cherry pick the National Academy of Sciences reports, and they're all over the place, but I sort of trust them, and I trust them a lot more than some of the other things that are being done. I'd like to see the study done, and I urge anybody who lives in one of those 7 areas to go contact your Congress. There's 30 members of Congress who represent those 7 districts, and let's get all of them involved, and maybe we can. If not, let's make a big deal out of the fact that they're squashing cancer research.
The study has been, the study scheme has been made, hasn't it? And they made the scheme for the study and then never carried out the study. Is that not right?
Well, they made a proposal in phase 2, and it was an epidemiological study, and they wanted to focus on groups like children more, and they wanted to. I think they were going to appoint a new group to do it, and they would determine the exact methodology. There's a lot of methodological problems in doing it. So what the proposal was to do the study, and they outlined some ways to do it. You can go read the report. It's only 30 pages to see exactly how they were going to do it, but they just never did it. They would have to meet again and probably decide again how to do it.
Right. Okay. Well, I lied. David wants to say something, and so I'm going to put off Alice, Tom, and Michelle again and call on David.
This is just a quick response to what you just said, Dr. Johnson, about getting Congress people involved. I would caution, at least in Illinois, which had the Dresden site as one of the 7 communities that was going to be studied, the Congress people in those areas are extremely pro-nuclear, largely for economic reasons. You have jobs, you have tax-based issues, and we've also found that these are largely in conservative rural areas, which tend towards the Republican Party for the most part. I'm not saying don't talk to your congressman, but I'm saying be very careful, because you might get someone who's actually his or her interest is in tamping down and not having the study done. You might consider going one ring of the onion further out, because it's usually the farther you get from a nuclear facility, at least the more open the legislators will be towards moving things along as opposed to those who have vested interests in keeping nuclear power going. Thanks. That's all.
Yeah, I don't know exactly all around the country. In fact, I'm surprised. I know a lot of people would not want to do it, but in California, the people that supported it were not just Mike Levin. It was Katie Porter, it was Harley Ruda, it was Salud Carbajal, and what was the other one? Oh, I'm sorry, but there was 4 members of Congress who supported it, and I can't imagine there aren't others in the country doing that. But I can't find out information about the rest of the country. I can't believe no one else cares about cancer.
Oh, I'm sure they do. I'm just saying that it's not a slam dunk that the local congressperson will be the one that will be supportive of the study. That's all.
You only need a few.
Oh, please go ahead, Roger.
No, I said you only need a few congressmen. That would all it would take.
Because this the trend of what we're talking about, I think we should stay on this for people that have a direct response. And I think that Michelle has something in the chat that you might want to bring up, Michelle. So could you please unmute and just say a little something?
I'm trying to remember what I put in chat. Okay, so I think the first things I put in the chat were the
Well, you talked about an NIH directed study.
Oh,
and
yeah. Okay, yeah, now I remember. Okay, so the first 2 things, there was a low-level radiation study that was sponsored by the DOE, but they somehow snuck some independent people in there. But they came out with the basic acknowledgement that there's basically been no zilch real study on low-level radiation impact, particularly with respect to populations and over time the way populations are exposed as opposed to workers or whatever. So I thought that their actual recommendation was pretty reasonable, provided it would be really independent scientists, and that's really where we have had, I think, a real problem with the National Academy of Studies. If you spend time going through who they pick and go bio by bio by bio, they're usually pretty linked to the industry. And that's the problem we have overall. The other thing I put in, which was part of my very upset, incensed afternoon, having to be on the consent-based consortium studies, which I'm sure some others here were also on and had the same agenda from. But I just wanted to read a quote from the Mothers for Nuclear representative when they were asked about something, who they're representing, and the individual, who is a guy, said, quote, "We're members of the public, which we think we are." Okay, here's from the Mothers for Nuclear webpage. Co-founders, Kristen Katz, a civil engineer and project manager at the Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant, and Heather Hoff, a materials scientist and nuclear operator at Diablo Canyon. So here we are at a public meeting that the DOE is sponsoring, and individuals from one of the groups that they're giving money, millions of money to, is putting themselves out as completely independent, just members of the public. So I urge everybody here to follow the DOE consent-based citing and really participate in that, because I think it's a prime opportunity to frankly embarrass people, particularly the academic groups that are involved. So I'm sorry, that was a really long-winded thing, but I've been really pissed off all day from that.
I went to that meeting myself, but I wasn't as sensitive to what was going on. Roger, do you have something that you'd like to say to Michelle? And then I'm going to call on Diane again, because I want to keep the thread going of what we're talking about.
Well, I just congratulate for keeping track of all this so closely. It's important that we all do this. And yes, we should get angry at it. It's just outrageous what's happening between the government and the industry and how they've, as I tried to point out, lied to the public blatantly for a century.
Right. So I need some advice. I haven't called on Alice, or Alice or Tom yet, and we've got Diane and David who have already spoken. So Alice McNally, is there something you'd like to say? Because you put something in the chat.
Yes, I would. I'd like to thank Dr. Johnson for his wonderful presentation. It's spellbounding. This was really good. And it was interesting that you mentioned the surf riders and how they went to court, and they are now the song Santa Onofre is obliged to put notices up on the website. That's the only place they put them. So if you don't look for them, you're not going to find them. But yesterday they did post another one, and tomorrow, or actually today, is the estimated start date to dump 1,500 and 561 gallons of radiated water into our Pacific over a duration of 6.5 hours. And I posted this in here, but it's basically 0.00181 reams percent of annual whole body limit, 0.242%. And then it says it is cumulative. So they do put it out there. And thank you, Dr. Johnson, for mentioning that.
Okay, and what about
Could I just say the key word she said is cumulative? Remember, it's cumulative. So one X-ray, you go to the dentist, we're going to do a bite wing. Oh, it's nothing. But what if you had 100 bite wings? And what if you had a CAT scan? What if you had IMRT? I mean, there's a lot of radiation exposure. It's all cumulative. So whenever they talk about one exposure, then forget it.
Yeah. Okay, Tom Corbett, do you want to say something? Are you here, Tom Corbett? Okay, so we'll go on then to have Diane make her comment again.
Well, I was, again, I feel like I agree 99.99% with absolutely everything that Roger presented, and appreciated, and think it was really well organized and presented and terrific. I am so cautious about the National Academy because I personally, since I started at Nuclear Information and Resource Service in '86, have tracked at least 8 studies that the National Academy has done. And I would say, and not me alone, but organizing others to do it. And we got a few good things out, and I think we prevented some bad things from coming out because we were on top of it. And the way that we do it is that we have to review everybody who's chosen for these panels. And I don't feel like it would be appropriate for me to go into specific stories in this format tonight, but I could tell you I'll give you one example. The last panel, which was done on, it was a panel that was, most of them are funded by DOE, NRC, and EPA. And they're usually requested by a congressperson. And the last one, it wasn't until the final meeting, this had gone on for over a year. It wasn't until the final meeting when a member of the public who'd been tracking this found out that the chair of the committee actually had worked for DOE for at least 14 years, something like that. And he did not reveal that in his bio that was given. So what it means when a panel is put together, the beer 7, the beer, whichever panels are put together, what we've had to do is read all of the bio, not just the bio that were presented, but read everything that these people have put together. So that person then admitted in the public comments, and then when he responded, he said, well, yes, he probably should have revealed his bias. And the whole point of the arguments that we were making is that the National Academy study, that this committee was biased, and that the history of radiation and health has been biased. So that was a bad example. And then there was another one where, well, I won't take a lot of time now. All I would say is that if we're going to proceed with having the National Academy do a study, then we are going to I'm going to need more than me. I mean, Cindy and I work together on these things, perhaps others on this, but it becomes a more than full-time job to track the biases or what the positions of these. We got the chair of the Biological Effects of Ionizing Radiation Committee removed. We found a quote that he had given that said, it was previously in a health physics journal, I think it was Mossman, and he had written, the next time that a National Academy study is done, it should find a safe threshold or a threshold, because it will save the industry money on decommissioning. Well, we found that and we were able to present that, and then even the Academy removed him from being the chair of that beer study. So I'm sure that they replaced him with someone else with a less blatant bias. But that is honest to goodness what happens. And the reason good things have come out in most cases is that we have been on top of it and made sure that all the members of the panel know how they're being used. And there's also procedures that the Academy staff use to skew the way the study is done. I'll talk to you about the Ward Valley study and how the scientist his studies were being reviewed, how the panel was stacked with people against him, and they would have had to revoke their own previously published work in order to rule with Howard Wilshire, the scientist that said that the Ward Valley dump would leak into the LA water supply. So anyway, okay, I'll stop. But my message is, if we're going to proceed with this, then it needs to be more than me and Cindy Folkers that spend our lives tracking all of the people who are on it, all the studies they've done, and the way that this thing is set up.
Obviously, Michelle is doing some of this work too.
Could I make a quick comment?
Yeah.
This has been going on. This has been going on for 75 years. One thing I intended to talk about, didn't, was the Atomic Bomb Casualty Commission 75 years ago. And they picked the people to run it. They were involved in crimes in Manchuria. And they said that we won't prosecute you if you cooperate with the Atomic Bomb Casualty Commission. And they were devoted to tell them whatever they want. And a lot of the Japanese, when they realized they weren't getting treated, they were just being exploited, they refused to cooperate. And nevertheless, they went in and they made up these radiation doses, and about 10 years later, and then they changed them about another 15 years later. And then we still use this as the gold standard of radiation dosage. And it's just terrible how the people in the industry control the data and control the narrative. And they've been doing it for years, and they're still doing it, and they get away with it.
I agree.
Okay, Dave.
Quick anecdote and then my comment. I would mention that I guess it was 2020, then candidate Tulsi Gabbard, representative from Hawaii, ended up going surfing, I think, with one of the surf riders, and they took her past the reactor. And shortly after that, she was the first presidential candidate to explicitly come out against nuclear power. Just a little anecdote. But what I wanted to bring up was a piece of news that just came out in the last day or so. A South Carolina representative, I think it was Ralph Norman, went to the floor of the House with a resolution to reduce Secretary of Energy Granholm's salary to $1, because in his opinion, she was not doing her job. He ran the whole list of things she was screwing up on and not doing right. And of course, it's not going to go anywhere. But it does bring an opportunity for us to perhaps have some of our representatives say, perhaps the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's budget needs to be reduced to $1 until they start regulating. Now, you did point out that most of the funding comes, and it does, from license fees and things like that. But there is a budget process that they have to go through. It would raise some publicity, and it would start, poking the bear a little bit. So I just wanted to throw that out there as an idea. if somebody as wacky as Representative Norman can get away with doing stuff like that, maybe some of our allies could do the same thing.
Great idea.
And okay, is that, if you have no further comment, I'm going to call on Tomoyo Tamayama. Tomoyo, please speak.
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Mhm.
Okay, so I'm probably the only one joining from Japan. And thank you very much for the presentation. And I have actually two comments or two questions about your the Roger's presentations. One is very recently the statesman from Japan went to Washington D.C. to join a meeting. And anyway, they met Arjun Makijani, and he wrote a book. I think a long time ago, and he wrote a book actually in Japanese, of course translated in Japanese, and he wrote a book about why Japan. That's the title of the book, and he wrote a book why the atomic bombs dropped in Japan, and the reason why the drop in the bombs in Japan was not because the racism but just because the plan was made much earlier or even before 1945, because the Japan didn't develop the technology to reverse engineering of the atomic bomb. So if the atomic bomb was dropped in Germany, if the bomb didn't succeed, and they could have made another atomic bombs. So that's why the United States chose Japan. But even that, my question to you is that why Nagasaki bombs was dropped after Hiroshima? I think it was not needed at all. And I think it should be the experiment of the plutonium bombs over the people. And that was my one question. And another question is that from next week in Tokyo, there will be a conference of ICRP. And there, the LNT model will be discussed to modify. And low dose radiation exposure could be much more downplayed by the result of I'm afraid the Fukushima nuclear accident data recently published by the Japanese scientists in English, but not in Japanese language. So the Japanese citizens do not know what the contents of the report or the papers were written in English. And most of the cases, the exposure in the beginning of the accidents were not recorded and not counted as the total exposures of to the human body and to the environment. And in fact, the UNSCARE, the United Nations Nationals, the UNSCARE report was also very much controlled by the pro-nuclear people. So I'm afraid the UNSCARE, ICLP Tokyo conference from next week is going to be used as a tool to deny the LND model. So what do you think about that? So thank you for taking my questions.
Very good.
If I can, could you want me to comment? I didn't talk about that today, but yes, there was a big issue there. We are told that the atomic bomb ended World War II. I saw something in the New York Times a couple of weeks about that. They're still saying that, but the purpose was not to end the war. The war was already over. Joseph Rothblatt, a scientist, when he was told that the purpose was to scare the Russians and not to end the war, and they were only using the Japanese, Rothblatt immediately resigned, spent the rest of his life against the nuclear weapons. But there was a bunch of reasons why they did it. One was the cost. They said that all hell would be paid be paid. If we diverted all this money, you spent all this money in these two bombs and you never used them. So they got to use them. Another one was to test the uranium versus the plutonium. They wanted to know that. Another one was to scare the Russians. Another was the technological imperative. They want to know how the thing worked because it's going to enter the nuclear age. And they wanted to test effects on a human population, which they couldn't do once the war ended. The US and Japanese governments were negotiating a surrender in July of 45. The Japanese had already agreed to surrender, and all they were fighting about is the position of the emperor. And US wanted the emperor deposed, and they wanted to keep the emperor. In the end, the Japanese won. They kept the emperor. Yes, the decision to drop in the Japanese, I don't think was anything to do with the war. The war was already over.
I really thank you for that comment and question, Tomoyo. And I would like now to call on a board member, Stephanie, because she put something in the chat that I think is really important. And so I want Stephanie just to tell us what you're talking about there in the chat. Go ahead.
Well, there was a study in the St. Louis University got a hold of some baby teeth, and they were doing studies for atomic bomb testings in regards to strontium-90. And it was found out later by those interested in exposing this, and now it is still an ongoing issue. And Joseph Mangano has asked us in Illinois around our nuclear power plants to try to get dentists to send, baby teeth to a certain address. And I'm sorry, I don't know where that is, for more studies. St. Louis is also, the first atomic city, very significant in the Manhattan Project. They buried all the waste first around the St. Louis airport, and then they dug it up and put it over into other suburban areas in St. Louis, which has since developed numerous cancers. The St. Louis moms went to Washington, D.C., so that the RECA could be could keep on going, so that it wouldn't end I'm not sure if it ends this year or next year, but they wanted to keep on going, and they wanted to be expanded as well. So it's a full circle.
Right.
It's supposed to end next year.
Next year.
Oh, there's a movie about this called Atomic Homefront that is available, and I'm pretty sure NEIS has it in its library. And there's also a book called Nuked, N-U-K-E-D, and then there's a subtitle about St. Louis and the legacy of nuclear, the nuclear project. And that book is by Linda C. Maurice. So if you are further interested in what happened in St. Louis, that would be a very good place for you to look. Don Chapman and Karen Nichols dog the EPA incessantly, making them crazy, trying to get them to do something about this. They're very, very active. I'm just wondering if there might be a minute for announcements or something that somebody wants to say. And we theoretically end this meeting at 8:29. But if you want, if the people in the audience still have things they want to contribute, we could go on as long as Rogers says it's okay. If you still have time or you still have energy to continue, we'll keep going until a little longer.
No, this is fine. It's important. I can wait.
Okay, so since we do have a little time, it looks like Mike Keegan jumped in there. He wants to say something. Go ahead, Michael.
Hello, I just wanted to note that I put in the chat, there's a whole new layer over all this, and it's the move towards HALU, which is high assay, low enriched uranium. It's up to 20%. And it has dual purpose as weapons and nuclear power. So the Department of Energy and the NRC wanted this build out to do the enrichment and wanted all these MSRs and advanced reactors to mesh up in time. I believe that the advanced reactors and the SMRs are a fig leaf to justify getting back in the enrichment game, and that's being done at Centrus. So I put those links in the chat. So have a take a look at that. But my point is, it's a military atom that's driving all this, and the SMRs are just, they're PowerPoint reactors, and I believe they're a fig leaf for the military atom. Thank you.
Do you want to say anything about that, Roger?
Yes, I agree. Military's behind a lot of it.
Oh, yeah. We had a night with the experts with the man, Alfred Meyer, who has, that's his, if you'll pardon the expression, shtick, that nuclear power and nuclear weapons are absolutely joined. And not only that, our own David Kraft has written a very good 1 or 2 page this 1 or 2 page essay that you can get on our website explaining the connection between nuclear power and nuclear weapons. And the president of France, Macron, said that you can't have one without the other. If you're not going to have weapons, you don't need the reactors. And if you don't have the reactors, you can't have the weapons. So what you're saying is, what this is about is very current. And you can, I think, go to, I'm not sure this is true, you could go to YouTube and watch our Night with the Experts with Alfred Meyer. So we don't have anybody else with their hand up, but I really would like to hear from Ace Hoffman. He put something about his book. I'm looking at what he wrote about his book, and I'll be darned, I paid $50 for that book about 8 or 9 years ago. And so Ace, would you mind making the announcement about your book?
Okay, sure, but I don't think I ever charged more than $25 for the hard copy. But
Yeah,
I
okay.
did want to mention you can
Sorry.
download it for free from my website at acehoffman.org. That's all I wanted to make sure that I mentioned. And I thought this was a wonderful presentation, but of course, having been mentioned in it, I'm biased.
Yeah, I was very happy that you got a mention in it too. Those were familiar pictures to me.
I got a free copy from Ace.
Good. You deserved it. Okay, anybody else? I guess we will now close the meeting. I'm going to turn it back over to Dave. And I think we're a little bit short on a meeting for November and December, but we do have one coming in January. So why don't we turn this back over to Dave, and you give us a chance to have a little bit of a view ahead on our January meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Jan. And thank you, Dr. Johnson, for a really, really, really interesting conversation tonight. That's what the experts are supposed to be about, is conversation as well as quality presentation. Yes, we appreciate all you coming tonight. And as I said at the beginning of the session, we usually do this the last Thursday of each month. We will be doing one at the end of November. We haven't quite got the topic nailed down. And we're taking the month of December off because of the holiday. But in January, we do have an old colleague of mine who now lives in the Pacific Northwest. And generally speaking, she has spent a career discussing how art plays a role in activism. And she'll be describing her project, which is called the Natural History Museum. And that will take place the last Thursday in January. So we hope that you will join us for that. So on that note, I want to thank everyone.
Let me just say that we will have a meeting in November, and it will be the last Thursday in November at 7, the same as this. So watch your email for the chance to register to come to that meeting.
Right. So a couple of things, little housekeeping stuff. You're able to save the chat if you want to, and if not, we do save it automatically. So if for some reason you can't save it, send us an email. We'll be happy to send the chat to you. We are recording tonight, and just as soon as we can get the Zoom link cleaned up a little bit, we'll try and get this up on YouTube. In the meantime, though, if you really, really need to see this again, we'd be happy to share the Zoom link just so you don't post it anywhere, because it'll be unedited at this point. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. Dr. Johnson, if you could just stick around a few minutes at the end, we usually do a wrap up together. And for the rest of you, wish you happy holiday, because it'll be Thanksgiving between now and the next time we see you. And Jan, thank you very much for moderating once again tonight. Okay, everyone, stay well. Enjoy autumn.